Okay, so what we'll do, because I didn't realize on the day we decided to do this call, was which kind of changed actually, interestingly, and I didn't clock it was the solar eclipse. But I don't think we can just ignore the solar eclipse. So I thought I'd just talk about that a little bit and like the relevance for Kundalini yoga and soul tribe as well, and more broadly. Um, then I thought we'd just do a quiet meditation and tune into Ophiucus and see what we get from that. Because I've been having quite a powerful experience of that actually. On Adasha's new moon thing last night, I was like downloading a Ophiucus, so hopefully that energy's still here all around. It is, I know, it's like wants to come into humans. And then I'll stop the recording and then we can just have a share of how the journey's been so far and that kind of thing. Okay, I'm just going to pin myself. I'm just going to change to, well, you can have it on whatever, but I'll change to speaker view because I'm not sure who it's recording at the moment. I pinned myself, so. Okay, so it's a solar eclipse today, and it's in the 13th sign of the zodiac, which is called Ophiucus, which, if you looked up into the heavens, it kind of spans this first, well, the last part of Scorpio and the first part into Sagittarius. So it is actually in the ring of the zodiac. And I think, from what I understand, NASA have accepted it kind of on the, in that way, NASA has to accept things, that it is the 13th sign of the zodiac. And so some of the archetypes of Ophiucus, so Ophiucus is a healer and he's holding the two Kundalini serpents in his hands, the male and the female serpent. And some of his earthly incarnations are said to be Moses. Remember Moses holding the serpent? I can't remember the full story, but it was all about him having faith in God anyway, that serpent story. I remember that. And Thoth, who's the Egyptian god of wisdom. Mercury is like a Roman derivation of Thoth, and Asclepius, who's the Greek father of medicine. So he's connected with healing and with and communication and wisdom as well. And it always feels like he's connected with the future because this 13th sign has only kind of in our lifetimes been accepted as part of the zodiac. It feels like he is a awakening energy and an energy that's like relevant for now and definitely being very activated at the moment. So let me share the chart. If at any time you want to ask anything, jump in, add anything, I'm going to ask you, Phoebe, to jump in where we talk about 54 line 4. But yeah, or you can write in the chat and then I'll invite you in to say something. Okay, so this, let me pick up the little pen here. Can you both see that okay, yeah? So this is the eclipse here. There's nice little numerology. It takes place in at 12 degrees Sagittarius, 22 minutes. So this is part of Sagittarius. That is where Ophiucus is as well. And we have two bodies conjunct the eclipse. This one here is called Vesta, and she is, her symbol is the flame, and she comes from the Vestral Virgins. And she is a priestess or a witch or a shaman archetype. So she also has a connection with healing. And in ancient times, you know, the priestesses were often astrologers. They could read oracles. They were very highly educated in, you know, mathematics and languages as well. Yes, so they came, and the name Vesta comes from the Vestral Virgins in ancient Rome. So there was a time when the Vestal Virgins had a lot of status. They were the only women in society who didn't have to marry. They weren't owned by their fathers and they weren't owned by their husbands. And also they could own property and business. So they had this like real level of independence compared to other women. And in the ancient temples, they had a lot to do with sexuality and fertility rites. And basically they could choose to have whatever lovers they wanted. So then we get to Roman times, and it starts to become a lot more oppressive, and the Vestal Virgins basically come to be owned by the state, by the emperor, and they have to be chaste from then on. And if they're not, it's like they get stoned to death and like quartered. You know, it's not like a little slap on the wrist. It's like considered really terrible. And so essentially their bodies and their sexuality become owned by the state. And that's quite an interesting kind of wound that I think we can still see unfolding at the moment. I've done quite a few readings recently with people with very strong Vesta. And actually, I've had this experience myself a while back of like an intense fear of being vaccinated by force and that kind of thing, which seems to be this very ancient fear of not owning our own bodies. And of course, not everyone's reacting like that, but it's quite interesting. As I say, I've had a few readings recently with people kind of absolutely filled with terror, and they had like Sun conjunct Vesta or something like that, you know, so they're strong Vesta in them. So, but this is a big issue. It's like, who owns our bodies? And we're breaking free from a lot of conditioning. And so while no one's got us chained to the kitchen sink anymore or locked in a prison cell, the way we get locked up is through our mental conditioning. So this is what we're breaking out of at the moment. And sometimes that can be really challenging. Okay, so there's this thing about the healing of the priestess or the witch or the shaman archetype that's happening with this eclipse. Okay, now this is really interesting as well. So this little, well, she's not a little goddess, big goddess. Yeah, it's called Hygeia. So I mentioned Ophiucus, one of his earthly incarnations is Asclepius, the father of medicine. and Hygeia is one of his daughters. So she has received this transmission of healing from her father, and she used to have dreaming temples in Greece. So people would come to the temple, they would sleep, they would dream, and they'd get healed through some kind of deep subconscious process. So I kind of feel, you know, she's connected with things like sound healing, like say mantras. We know mantras put you into alternative brain states, and through that healing can happen. And gong baths, you know, the gong sends you into the theta state, and in that theta state, like the self-catalyzing can happen. So she's got some really interesting manifestations in our times, I think Hygeia has. So she's there 22 degrees of Libra, and she's actually in what's called a challenging square to Venus, who is here in Capricorn. Okay, and Venus is here with Pluto. So another theme I'm feeling into this eclipse, would be interesting to see if you've been experiencing this, is like about inner authority, which is kind of based on intuition and feeling. And then there's outer authority, kind of what the culture expects of us, maybe what the government is saying we have to do, and whether we want to comply with that or not, you know. So it feels like we're being pushed towards discovering our inner authority, but at the same time, in the outer world, as the old system kind of collapses, we will, I think, more and more as well, see like the current authorities becoming more and more dominant, in that Pluto. Pluto can be very manipulative, very dominant, even violent as well. So that's the negative side of Pluto. So, so the challenge feels to be like, how do we harness Pluto's power for healing and well-being and like the betterment of humanity, rather than this kind of old game of, you know, just kind of complying with the people in authority and what they say to us. Hello. So just to let you know, I'm recording at the moment, and I'm just talking a bit about the solar eclipse. So you can watch back as well the first bit I did, and then when we're sharing, I'll stop. Do you want
Can
to
I
say
ask
something,
something?
Phoebe? Yes, of course.
So Venus is in her own house, in the second house of awareness for me. And then Pluto there would be dominant because it's the slower moving planet. However, Venus is applying. So she's come to complete a cycle, and she's in her own domain, and so she's bringing awareness to people, waking up their intuition, um yeah, to know that they do own their own bodies. So that goddess energy is waking up, would you say?
Oh yeah, and actually that reminds me, the thing I forgot to say as well. We were talking about the priestess Vesta, who's in Jinki 995 there, and Metis, who's the most ancient form of the goddess, is actually there with Vesta in Jinki 9, which is this really I think it's called the power of the infinitesimal, and it's about all these like little things that happen, like every little thing we do every day with our intention and our practices, and it builds towards like this greater vision and something bigger. So yeah, I felt the goddess energy as well, really powerfully in this meditation, celestial communication last night. So yeah, it feels like not only is the priestess awakening, but she's also connected back to the source of her power, her being, which is the ancient mother energy. Yeah, so it's all kind of supporting each other, really.
So I have felt that energy, Alison. You were asking earlier, and I felt activated through the infinitesimal of the Gene Key 9 when I went to visit a friend, and I actually experienced through dreaming um, an activation that brought. So I feel as though I was being visited by a priestess that had been doing energy work in the place where I was visiting, that gave me an activation. So it's interesting, you know, that most of my self work goes on here where I am now. But actually, my last two big activations have been when I've left this property. Interestingly enough, because the bigger another activation I had, which kind of brought me into my altar, if you like I entered through a portal when I did my sweat lodge training. That happened on the full moon at 29 degrees of Pisces when we were in Gene Key 36, which was in September. And now here we are, and there was another activation happening in the 9, which funnily enough is where my Neptune is. So now I'm joining the dots as I speak. So I got another activation, and I did feel that Hygeia was having a lot to do with it, because I've been using the mantra Date Hey, and yeah, I feel that it's brought me enough into the present moment to receive through the sound current and through the ethers.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'm just going to say one more thing on this chart, which is that so this little body here, she's another goddess asteroid called Estrella, and she's about seeding the golden age energies, the new golden age energies, and she's all about our subtle awareness, like our ninth, 10th body awareness increasing. So this is how we're transforming, really, is that our subtle awareness is increasing. And this is like our superpower, the subtle awareness. So this point here, I've kind of been going on about this amazing imprinting of Venus that's going to happen early next year in January. That's why we're doing the Venus Moon Sanctuary. And that is going to take place in 54 line 4, where Estrella is today. So it feels like Estrella is like planting these seeds of this new way of being, which is then going to be even more powerfully activated by Venus, and that will take us through a whole like 18-month cycle. So this Gene Key 54 line 4 was considered by Ra Uru Hu, who is the person who sort of channeled the human design system, which the Gene Keys is a kind of extension in a way of human design. And he said this 54 line 4 was where big biological mutation in humanity would begin. And he talks about it as a point where polarities come to this place of stillness. And if that's what Ophiucus sort of feels like to me, like we have polarity of male and female, but when we have this kind of merging and it comes to stillness, it's the word that's coming to me is like the Taurus energy. You know, it's like still in the middle, and then there's this power coming out of the central, like still place. So this 54 line 4 is really intriguing. I think we're going to discover a lot more about it as we go on. Do you want to say something, Phoebe, about there's no mythology attached to it? I hadn't
Mm.
kind of thought of that.
Yeah, so that was something that I joined up just in the last 24 hours, and you've kind of opened the door to this whole mythology, I feel, as a pre, how would you say, warm up. Here we are on the eclipse. I didn't realize we were going to be talking about the 54, and this is perfect because then I don't know what I'm going to say. And it's better, isn't it? Let the voice come through. And so the 54 you're saying is with Astrea in the line 4. And the last time we talked about Astrea, in fact, the first time I was introduced to Astrea, is that when we discussed that she was discovered after Vesta, thinking that's it, there are no more new heavenly bodies to be discovered, and then Astrea was discovered, and it was the door opener to the rest of the galaxy. It's almost as though, like I say that in what we are aware of now, and all these other goddess asteroids, the Astrea is the door opener to the feminine bodies that help us to connect to source. And so I just wanted to mention that first of all, because I think it's really brought us to that point. So yeah, the 54 line 4, if you read in some material that I've got, which we call the line companion, it as you talked about the polarity, it's called enlightenment and endarkenment. And what you find with Ra's work is that there'll be an exaltation and there'll be a detriment to every point in the mandala, every sphere of every line of the 360 points in the mandala. You'll find, I've just lost my thread now. Yeah, you will find, what was I saying about in the polarity? Yeah, that's right. You'll find that these got these astrological points that are suggesting that there is something linked in the cosmos already, which is helping us to reflect into what is meaningful for us when we come across that aspect. You know, when we want to intellectually apply something to help us with our awareness into deeper meaning. And in the 54 line 4, there isn't an exaltation and there isn't a detriment, which it's the only point that doesn't have that. And what he goes on to say in the line companion is that when you look at the I Ching, which is how many thousand years old, we know it's one of the first oracles that we've got, there hasn't really been that much work done on this point, whereas most things get updated like as consciousness moves through them. And so the 54 line 4 is wide open. And it's kind of showing us the patriarchal program that's been in place around the, you know, since antiquity, let's say, before or after the Vestal Virgins were taken over by state power. Yeah, it's the face of Vishnu, isn't it, Alison? We listen to it. It's more esoteric, which offers this kind of original point of the holograph that takes us to the root, that the subjugation of the feminine principle comes back to every religion, just comes back to this prime point, doesn't it, Alison? And maybe you can say a little bit more about that. But what I feel, and I'll just say lastly, that's happening for us is that we have an opportunity together in our sanctuary to create mythology. We're going to be putting meaning to the 54 line 4.
Yeah, it's like we're creating a new mythology. Like that's the opportunity to actually create a new mythology. Like a new, what does the modern day um, devotee, priestess, yogi, we're all kind of we're growing and expanding, and we're wanting to serve, to manifest our gifts in the world. So that's what feels like we're all being pushed towards, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that unfolds. I mean, I had no idea any of this was going to happen at the point. Yeah, and 54, by the way, which we haven't mentioned as well, is there's only a couple of gene keys, 54 and its partner, the 53, that specifically refer to Kundalini yoga as well. So for you guys watching now and for those watching later, I'm sorry if I've thrown you into the deep end here, and it probably is all really mystifying and puzzling. But part of the journey is what's actually going to happen to us. What are we going to experience? So we don't actually have to have all the answers now. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. Yeah, so we don't have to have all the answers now, but hopefully I'm communicating something of the magnitude of what is going to unfold in the next 18 months. It just feels like a really amazing opportunity to work together to create. I like that, to create a new mythology. And we will all be part of creating that. I don't think one person can create this. This is about, an Aquarian group dynamic. And I mean, I don't know if and where it's happening elsewhere in the world, but it feels like Soul Tribe is such an amazing vessel for this to land in, because of the ethos, because of the people, and because of the Kundalini yoga. So it's like all the tools exist here already, and very experienced people and energy holders, to carry us through this amazing epic journey we're going to go on. Okay, so I wanted to just take a pause there, and just for us to close our eyes for a moment. So the sun and moon and the earth have lined up in this incredible, miraculous way earlier today, or last night for you guys in America. So let's just take some time, just a few minutes, to be here together, just really attuning our subtle awareness to the eclipse, to Ophiucus, who holds the Kundalini yoga serpents, god of wisdom and healing. to the most ancient mother Metis, who was banished by the patriarchy. Let us welcome her back, welcome her wisdom, her compassion. Welcome back the ancient priestess with all her wisdom and gifts, her devotion, her power of intention to create and keep the equilibrium of the world. To nurture the inner fire. And to work and serve with her whole body from the invisible realms. To serve the beloved, serve the Creator. And to take these archetypes into our very being, into our cells, into our atoms. And when we feel ready, coming back, opening our eyes. So I'm going to stop the recording now.